Yesterday's Super Tuesday results effectively narrowed the field to President Trump, former President Trump, and President Biden. A rematch. Most expected that this was going to be the outcome. Well, earlier today, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley officially announced that she was suspending her campaign for the GOP nomination. What can we make of yesterday's outcome of the Super Tuesday election? Joining me now to help break down the results is FRC Action Director Matt Carpenter. Matt, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Great to be with you, Tony. Thanks for having me.
All right, Matt, let's hit the big ones. What are your takeaways from Super Tuesday?
Well, obviously, we're looking at, I think, what's going to end up being a Biden and Trump matchup. There wasn't too much news made on that front. Biden won most of the Democrat contests. Trump won most of the Republican contests, with the exception of Vermont. But beneath the surface, there is quite a bit actually to look at here. Biden becomes the first incumbent to lose a primary in 44 years. Believe it or not, he actually lost American Samoa. I don't think a contest many people were paying attention to. There weren't many voters in this contest, Tony, just I think under 100 last time I checked. But still, it's kind of a bizarre barometer on how the president's doing with his base at this time, where this little-known long-shot guy, Jason Palmer, still trying to figure out who he is and what he's about, bests President Biden. But I think even more important maybe than that one singular instance is kind of this emerging phenomenon on the Democratic side of his protest vote, this uncommitted block of voters that is taking the time to go and vote in these primaries and register their disfavor with how the president is handling his job in the office. We saw last month in Michigan, 13% of the total vote on the Democratic side of the primary registered as uncommitted. This time in Minnesota, another key state for the upcoming general election, 19% of Democrats voted uncommitted. Now, drilling down a little further here, Tony, if you look at Hennepin County, which is kind of the population center of Minnesota, 1 out of 4 voters in Hennepin County, 25%, went for uncommitted over Biden. So there's an emerging problem here, a protest vote for the president, not where you want to be really going into a contested general election where you've got this rebellion kind of emerging in your camp.
Isn't that surrounding the Israeli-Hamas war that's going on, that you have this standoff between Palestinian supporters that are voting or not voting for the president?
So that was, in the Michigan instance, you had Rashida Tlaib made that argument to her supporters in Dearborn, Michigan, which is a heavily majority Muslim population area. And so that was certainly the case there. It looks like, Tony, this has metastasized beyond that. And now you have younger voters and you have other more progressive voters kind of joining in with that protest vote that was in Michigan just a Muslim majority vote, but has now kind of grown. And so we saw a sizable chunk of the Democratic base vote uncommitted. I mentioned Minnesota earlier, but this phenomenon showed up also in Alabama on the Democratic side, in Colorado, in North Carolina, and in Massachusetts as well.
Very, very interesting. All right, very quickly, some specific congressional races that FRC Action and FRC Action PAC were involved in. Give us the rundown on some of those races, faith, family, and freedom-oriented candidates. Yeah,
so one of the states we were looking at last night closely was North Carolina, Tony. Actually, some of the exit polling I saw from North Carolina showed that 52% of GOP primary voters in North Carolina consider themselves evangelical Christians. So you have this population of voters who would fit, a large chunk of them would fit within that spiritually active, governance-engaged conservatives that we've been talking about here. But even more so than that, North Carolina went through a round of redistricting. And so, you kind of play out the demographics of some of these new districts they drew, and the potential House majority next year could run through a state like North Carolina. And so I'm looking at a place like North Carolina's 6th congressional district, where on the Republican side, it's going to be, most prognosticators will tell you North Carolina 6 is a safe GOP seat. But I'm looking at Addison Dowell and Mark Walker are going to go into a runoff in May, so that'll be decided then in North Carolina's 6th Congressional District. Also, North Carolina's 8th Congressional District. This is another one of those safe GOP seats that's going to help form the next majority, where Mark Harris was just announced a couple hours ago. I think Washington Post and Politico just called it for him. He escaped the runoff threshold there, so he's won the primary, and he's looking he's in a good position for November. But also in North Carolina 1, you've got maybe the only toss-up district in the state where you've got freshman Democrat Don Davis, who's voted to the left of that district for his tenure so far, is going to take on Republican challenger Lori Buckhout. So a lot's going to run through the Tar Heel state, and there's some good conservatives emerging there for voters to decide on in November.
Yes, and FRC Action had a good night last night with our candidates. Matt Carpenter, great to see you. Thanks so much for the update.
Likewise, Tony. Great to be with you.